G'day, how's it going? Steve here from Wallaby Designs, and today I wanted to show you Git Web Manager. So Git Web Manager is a self-hosted dashboard for deploying Git repositories to local and remote paths. It manages rollbacks, health checks, preview builds, and automated dependency updates. So when you first create a user, you'll be presented with this dashboard view. The dashboard view allows you to go between your projects, which is usually your Git repository projects, and that can be ones you own or ones that you're pulling from external repositories, as well as any containers that you might have, and you can see them here and manage them here. Obviously, this is a fresh installation on just a temporary subdomain, but generally speaking, you would see a list of projects here with a little graph next to each one showing how the most recent health checks have been going and so forth, with as well as any badges that you might need to be aware of, say NPM issues or otherwise. Now, coming here, you can come and check the health. Obviously, I have no projects here, so that's not going to do anything, but that will run a check through all of your projects to check as 200 status on each of them for any that is enabled. And if there are, it'll add another little spot on the graph and you'll be able to see all as well, or you'll be able to see, hey, the website's down, at which point you'll probably get an email telling you that that has happened. So this check updates tab is for any Git projects you might have that are tied to a Git repository. If you press check updates, you'll be able to check with the remote repository, and if there are any updates, it'll pull them and add them to the queue to be deployed and dispersed. So let's start moving on to the project tab. But before I do that, actually, one thing that we added more recently, it was kind of a major overhaul, was to add a language selector. So this now allows you to use, and we have a number of supported languages obviously here, and we had AI help us with some of the translations. So apologies if any of the translations are inaccurate, but if you use one of these languages, speak one of these languages, and the translation is incorrect, this is a repository you can contribute to, and you can help us fix these translations. The goal was to make this more accessible and available to other languages, and switching out, you don't lose your progress, it just kind of switches everything out, and it's a lot more readable for different languages. So I just wanted to demonstrate that since it was a brand new feature. So moving on, the project tab is next. So in the project tab, we have a small side column here, and you can create a new project. This is a list of current projects, which again is any Git repositories that you've listed here. And those projects will be separated down into the directory structure that you've created, and can be collapsed or expanded as need be. There's a task queue, which, as I mentioned earlier, with the health checks and audits, and I didn't think I mentioned audits, but with the update checks, that'll all be added to the task queue. And we'll go into that here in a moment. The Action Center is a place where any errors or issues might be found. So, for example, as I mentioned, I think earlier, if there is an NPM issue with one of your projects or a composer issue if you're using something with PHP, it'll all show up here and it'll tell you that there are issues, and it'll give you an ability to correct some of those, as well as for any dependency issues. Let's say there are vulnerabilities that have been detected, then those will show up here as well. Remote access is where you can configure FTP and SSH access to any remote repositories or even local ones. If you've got the same web host for multiple users, you can use the SSH or FTP access here to be able to access them. Because a lot of times you'll have this, let's say, installed under one user, and then you might wish to access content from another user, and that might be a way to get around that. So let's start off. Let's go into just creating just a generic project. So you can put in here some basic information. So I'm just going to call this test for now. And this is where the directory structure can be found. So you've got here as many directories as you want. You can have test/test/test, and that's 3 directories deep. I don't know if we need to do that. Let's make this just 2 directories deep, just for giggles. I'll leave it on Laravel, that's fine. Repository address, I'm just going to leave a dash there. And I'm going to leave this blank, actually. And the local path, I will have just a dash. And I'm going to check permissions. It's not writable. Okay, interesting. So my local, oh, that's because I'm actually on my website. I was thinking I was on my remote. I was on my local development, in which case a slash would work. So I'm not going to go into creating this project, but obviously the root directory is not writable by the user I have this published to, but that's a useful little warning. This up check here can be anything. For Laravel, that's the default is /up if that's configured, which again it is most of the time for Laravel, but any page should work. If you have this as just a slash, it'll go to the site URL that is here, and it'll perform a health check on that. If you want to exclude any paths, you can do that. Let's say there are documentation or whatever attached to the repository, you can put them here, say docs, and it'll exclude that. Or, on the contrary, if you wanted to just publish the docs, you could put that in the whitelist paths, and it'll only pull that and ignore everything else. So there's options there. Mentionable, obviously here that's a drop down, so you can select different things. Now this is where the remote deployment comes in. So you can select here, enable FTPS sync for this project. This is where you would select any current FTP configuration, and then here is the remote path relative to that, and you can test the connection here. Same with SSH. Yeah. On the next page, you will see a couple of fields for, and I can't go to the next page because I don't want to reveal my user structure just for security reasons. On the next page, you'll see htaccess and in any configuration like a .env file will be there, and you can sit there and you can put in those values before deployment so that there won't be any compilation errors. So moving on, let's actually look at the task queue for a moment. So the task queue has obviously a process queue button. You can purge duplicates and you can clear the queue. There are a number of tabs here for just generally looking at processes in the queue, as well as down here, any queued items will be displayed here. There will be buttons next to each item where you can say process item, or move it up and down the queue, or even cancel or delete it from the queue. And actually I didn't show you the FTP, so I'll show you that in a minute. Now on the containers tab, this is where you can get into Docker and I apologize if I'm saying this wrong, Kubernetes. I've never actually known how to pronounce that, so apologies. I've only ever seen it written. And so we've got here a bunch of controls here for making networks, volumes, whatever you might need. And you can monitor that from here. You can see any containers that you have running. On this local test development, I don't have Docker installed, so obviously it's showing issues. But if you have it installed in a separate directory that it's maybe not finding directly, you can add it in within an area I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to quickly go back though, because I did forget to show you this. So on the remote access, you can see here remote access, and this is where your accounts will be shown for any FTP or SSH accounts. And you can create a remote access account here, and then create and test the connection all from here. So pretty useful. On the users tab, you have the ability to, you are the admin user, and which is why my user thing here is gold. And you have the ability to create sub-users. Now, sub-users aren't able to get into some things. For example, they won't see this system tab, as well as a few other things. And so they will be able to perform other actions, but not all actions that, say, the admin user will be able to access. And as you can see, my email settings are not configured, so going here will take me to system to go set that up. But you can create here a basic user, name, email, temporary password, and then send it to them to set their own. Obviously, in my case, the email settings are not set, so that wouldn't they wouldn't get that email, but you can, give them that information. So on the workflows page, we have the ability to do some really cool stuff actually. So let's create a workflow. You can see here, you can give it a name. I'm going to give it a name of test. And on a deployment success, I want it to send an email. So I'm going to call this, I don't know, that's fine. And I'm going to go test@mail.com. So, and include the project owner. I'm the project owner, so I'm going to, it'll send me that. and I can create this workflow. If I want to add additional things, let's say a webhook destination, I can do that by pressing that. And so it'll perform this, it'll send an email to numerous emails if I specify that, or it can be sent to an external destination to tell the external destination, hey, this is completed. And so that's pretty cool. I'm going to delete that just for, I don't want to have to worry about configuring that. So here we see that. There it's enabled, one trigger and one delivery destination. Now again, my email settings are not configured, so nothing's really going to work here, but it's worth knowing. In the system settings, you can see here that there is an update. I left it unupdated so that I could show you this. So you'll see here just some nerd stuff, but the current version and the latest version. So if you check now and they are the same, and you know that there probably is an update, you can check here manually. But obviously I see that there is an update, and I can press here, update, or force update if there are local changes that are not being found. And here you can see the process of it running. Now it's going to run in the background, so we can ignore that, but that's just good to know. Now if there are any things you need to modify, you can come here to the app dependencies and you can audit even this app itself. So you can check to make sure that there are no dependency issues. If there are updates, this is built in Laravel, so if there are any composer updates, you can check for that. You can audit the project and so forth, just to keep this vulnerability free. Then there's a debug log. I had some updates that there was I think they had an issue with some text, but I left this here for you to see. It was during the language translations, and there was some funky business with that. So anyway, so you can see this was successful, and if I refresh, you'll see that is successful, and you don't see an option here to update again. So pretty cool. In terms of the scheduler, you can come here and check on the scheduler. So my scheduler ran 2 minutes ago. There was nothing for it to do because I have no projects, but it ran a heartbeat, and if there were any projects, it would have polled them for health checks, it would have processed the queue, everything else. In terms of system logs, because there are a lot of logs that can build up, it's a good idea to be able to clear them out, and I've got a default setting here set of 30 days, or which you can obviously make it less if you want to. And you can enable automatic scored log cleanup, especially if you're having issues with space, or you can clear them all manually. But this is basically like all the logs and the outputs that you can see, and a lot of them you'll probably never read, so you might not need this to be for very long. But if you're running into some issues with deploying a project, you might want to keep that there. In terms of the cron setup, this is where you can do that. You can press this button to install the cron. Now obviously I've got that installed, and so that's not an issue. So I don't need to do anything there. On the app and security page, this is where we can check for system updates. And now I recommend you keep this selected because I'm constantly having the project itself updated for dependencies. So this will save you from having to do that manually, as well as if there are any new features, you'll get them as they come. This system will update itself once every 24 hours usually, if there is one. And perform those auto updates is obviously where that will do that. So nightly self updates will perform without your help if you want it to be done. Otherwise, you can do it manually, and that's fine too. Just one thing to be able to set. You can set your time zone, so all of your logs and everything will be based on whatever time zone you have here. Now, in terms of audit checks, now this is an enterprise feature. There are a number of enterprise features that I didn't really mention earlier. Enterprise is just a way to add extra features in for those who would like to support this project and also would like to use this for, I guess, more purposeful reasons. This allows us to be able to maintain this project. We've put a lot of work into this, so a few extra features such as audit checks, additional projects, and containers allow us to, work on this and keep this as a project for people to use. So if you would like to have an audit or other features as well, you can get Enterprise, and that allows you to do a lot more stuff within the app. And you can access the addition and stuff from here. So the addition section is where you can see that you have what version you have. I have the community version, as you can see, and if you have a license key, you can put that here and you can verify that. So that's if you have, let's say you're moving installations and you have a license key, you can transfer it over here. You can clear the license that's set up. Just a place to be able to modify that. Just wanted to show that. In terms of the environment config, you might remember from the containers section talking about the Docker section. So this is where you would find those settings. You can come through, look for it, and press save when you find it. Now, email settings, obviously, like I said before, this is a fresh installation. I don't actually have any email set up here. This is just for testing. So this is where you would set those. So you can send a test email to make sure that your email settings are correct. So you don't have to even try to do anything fancy with that. But yeah, so that's it for the community version of Git Web Manager. I hope you'll give this a try, and I hope this is useful for some people. Thank you for watching.